Dr. Garland is with the University of California, San Diego School of Preventive Medicine and is the primary investigator on this project. Welcome, Dr. Garland. All right. Dr. Garland, thank you for coming.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Carol.
We have just put together some data from the Grassroots Health Cohort, which shows with diabetes that there is a very significant, possibly as high as 80 or 90% reduction in diabetes with higher vitamin D serum levels. Please give me your impression of that data and what you think it means.
Well, I think the data are amazing. I'm so excited to see them. They have confirmation in the cohort that vitamin D can prevent diabetes. It's such a terribly serious disease affecting so many millions of people throughout the world that we're able to bring under control with vitamin D. It's a brand new era.
Is this at all surprising to you?
No, it's not surprising. It's just not surprising.
All right.
I think it's true. Well, we know it's true for type 1 diabetes.
Okay.
That everywhere you go in the world, distant from the equator, there's a very high burden of the disease. 65 per 100,000, for example, kids get it in Finland, which is at 60 degrees north latitude, whereas it's virtually non-existent anywhere near the equator. So we knew it would be that way for type 1 diabetes, but we didn't have ecological studies for type 2 diabetes. So we were more dependent on studies of individuals. But those studies are revealing, and probably most eloquently the Grassroots Health study is revealing, that vitamin D out and out prevents diabetes. That vitamin D out and out prevents diabetes, whether type 1 or type 2. It doesn't seem to matter.
I think the interesting thing to me also is that the percent reduction is in the 80 to 90% range, which is also what's quoted for type 1, if you can catch that in time.
It's kind of amazing since we have a short period of time and we have a method that's you might not think would have the capability of revealing that, particularly with a short time frame, but it must be a very short-term effect. It must happen quite quickly, as it does for, say, premenopausal breast cancer, where it's a matter of a few months that the benefit occurs, and apparently that's what's happening for diabetes. It's a very quick action that vitamin D is able to take to keep the disease from occurring.
So if I were an adult person right now that did not have diabetes and I had a low vitamin D serum level, you would recommend what?
Oh, I'd get to the doctor immediately and have your diabetes measured, or to go to the Grassroots Health website and have it tested and find out what your serum vitamin D level is, the 25-hydroxy vitamin D level, and get it up at least into the range of 40 to 60 nanograms per ml, preferably at the high end of that range. And in doing that, you will be responding as quickly as possible to the science that's just in a matter of months gotten extremely solid. And the Grassroots Health Cohort will put the bow on the present to humanity of the eradication, in my view, or virtually eradication of diabetes.
The comparison that group that Grassroots Health used to see this very significant reduction was the NHANES group. Can you tell us a sentence or two about the NHANES study and why this is a significant control group for us?
Well, it is the national sample of people. It's collected each year from different people to represent the health status of Americans. So we have no better, no larger, no more geographically comprehensive, no more accurate study than the NHANES. And we know from the NHANES that the incidence rate is 8.5 per 1,000 person years. In the Grassroots Health Cohort, which is equally accurately studied, it's only about 1 per 1,000 person years. So it's an 8-fold difference. And the NHANES really is a gold standard against which all other studies can be compared. And that in that comparison, NHANES really is showing us clearly that the intake of vitamin D in the Grassroots Health Cohort is great enough, and their serum level of 25-hydroxy vitamin D is great enough to eliminate nearly 90% of type 2 diabetes.
And the serum level achieved in the Grassroots Health Cohort was right at 48 nanograms per milliliter, for those of you who are wondering what is that magic number that we use to compare.
Yes.
And in Hanes, it was only 21 nanograms per milliliter. So that difference made a reduction of about 90% of the incidence.
That's a key point, because many physicians and many patients, even some people who previously were serious students of this, said that, well, if you get your blood up to 20 nanograms per milliliter, that you will be fine. You have no problem. But it's not that way at all. If you get it up to 45, you might be fine. You'll get rid of probably 80%. If you get it up to 50 or so, you probably will have a 90% reduction in the incidence of this terrible disease. So the time is now to take the action.
Dr. Garland, one of the things that I would like to know, or I think our audience would like to know, is can you tell us a little bit about the possible mechanism with this prevention of type 2, probably diabetes here?
Sure. A mechanism emerged as we studied type 1 diabetes, and that is that type 1 diabetes is very clearly failure and ultimately death of the islet cells that make the insulin. And the reason these cells die is that the barriers that protect them from viruses and other pathogens in the normal course of a child's life are not present. So the viruses penetrate into the islets of Langerhans, the inner sanctums, or sancta, if you like, of the pancreas, where the delicate ballerinas, the little beta cells, are located, whose function it is to produce insulin. And they attack the beta cells, and they make them very sick. They present antigens on their cell membrane that attract an autoimmune response. And what the virus doesn't do to kill a beta cell, the immune system will do. And therefore we call it an autoimmune disease. But if we kept the barriers sealed, the Chinese walls, if you like, around these inner sancta, millions of them that are located in the pancreas, the viruses would never get in. There would be no killing of the islet cells by the viruses, and there would be no stimulation of the autoimmune response, because if viruses don't make their way into the islet cells, they will not present the antigens that stimulate the release of lymphokines that bring the killer cells, the killer T lymphocytes, to the area, and the wholesale killing of the last islet that exists, causing type 1 diabetes and making the patient dependent on insulin for the balance of their life.
Wow. On people that have diabetes, what is their prognosis for other diseases? I mean, let's even assume that they are being treated. Then what happens?
Well, in type 1 diabetes, it's terrible. It's the main cause of organ failure requiring transplantation in the United States. And ultimately, it's one of the major causes of non-traumatic amputations in the U.S. Probably at the top of the list of causes of non-traumatic amputation. So there's feet and lower legs and extremities that are lost to it. In type 2 diabetes, the initial complications are milder, but unfortunately, many people who have type 2 diabetes, which is not dependent on insulin, get type 1 diabetes as a complication of their type 2. And then they get these same terrible complications that people who had type 1 from childhood get. So by preventing type 2 diabetes, we're helping the people that have a form of the disease that sometimes is modestly at least controllable to one that's not controllable and wreaks havoc with the organs.
And I assume that for those people that really want to be healthy, that there is more to life than just taking vitamin D. What else should these people be doing that impacts the incidence of diabetes?
Well, for people who have type 2 diabetes, the general prescription is to exercise and to lose weight, and usually by reducing caloric intake. Exercise is ideally performed outdoors, where the vitamin D level will even be enhanced by the fact of being outdoors, and ideally with enough skin exposed to make vitamin D, which generally speaking means 40% of the total skin area, including the shoulders, which are prominent in the biosynthesis of vitamin D. And very important aspect of it is to do those lifestyle aspects, because it helps us cover all the bases and they should be a very high priority. But at the same time, measurement of vitamin D should be an annual, at least, concern of people who have diabetes, and preferably it should be done in March when the level is lowest. But it's not a bad idea when people are first easing into this to do it all the time, say every, at any given month, every 6 months or so, because you don't know how successful your vitamin D intake is in raising your 25-OHD, sometimes for a number of months, sometimes it takes a year to be sure. So you don't necessarily want to wait a whole year for the cycle to go into March, but check it in between and see that it's getting up toward that high end of the 40 to 60 nanogram range, which the predominant body of vitamin D scientists have agreed on is the appropriate amount of vitamin D, but is way above the average level in the U.S., which is only in the 20s.
Okay. And how long would it take to prevent this? How many thousands of years? Tongue in cheek?
It's certainly within a year. This is a short-term effect. Does not take very long to happen.
So if we pulled out all the stops and said, hey, everybody do it, we'd have a big impact really fast?
We'd have a huge impact. Out of those nearly 2 million, we would eliminate virtually all of them. We'd leave maybe 10% behind, if that. And
Wow.
if it were fully implemented on a whole population basis. It's a rarity in the history of epidemiology or medicine to have something that acts that quickly and could be implemented as readily and cheaply as restoring
safely?
vitamin D, and safely.
Yes.
2 levels
Yes.
in the range of 40 to
Yes.
60 nanograms.